Hi everyone, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology. Today I'm going to be bringing you this video talking about Mercury in the sign of Scorpio and how it has begun into its retrograde shadow period. And in that process, it's making a few aspects with other planets that it will combined with 3 times over this Mercury retrograde, shadow retrograde process. So let me first just point out Mercury retrograde. And basically, it's occurring on the 31st of October. And it's going to be occurring at 27 degrees of Scorpio. Now, it's going to retrograde all the way back to 11 degrees of Scorpio. So if you look at the chart on the screen right now, Mercury is at 16 degrees. So it's already moved into what's called its shadow period, or the portion of Scorpio that it's actually going to move through and then move back in its retrograde motion to 11, and then go direct again and move forward. So when we are dealing with the shadow period of Mercury retrograde, it just can be a time when we are beginning to sense, see some of the communication issues that might be being addressed when Mercury does fully go into its retrograde time. And retrograde times, by the way, are, for any planet, are a time where we're revisiting the issues related to that planet and the sign that it's in, and perhaps seeing new ways of doing things in regards to that archetype and that sign. So with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, these could be basically like beginning to revisit and look at things with just a much deeper perspective, because that's what Scorpio is all about. You know, it's Scorpio energy is the researcher and the investigator, and Scorpio is about looking deeply into the unconscious and discovering, you know, what's there. It's also very much about truthfulness and power. So this retrograde time, beginning with the shadow, and by the way, the shadow time ends after Mercury goes direct. Mercury goes direct on November 20th after going retrograde on October 31st, but it comes out of shadow. It comes out of shadow around December 7th. So, but back to the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, you know, we may really begin to just see where we're really kind of putting our mental resources in a way. Where are we directing our thoughts and our communication in ways that might need to be either let go of or elevated in some way from the more lower base expressions of Scorpio energy, which can be like manipulation and control and secrecy and hiding. You know, where can we kind of elevate that part of ourselves, the thinking mind, the communicating mind, so that we can ultimately kind of free up that energy in the unconscious? Because really Scorpio is about power and focus and harnessed energy. And so when we can ultimately direct Scorpio energy in that way, and let go of and transform within ourselves the attachment to these other ways of expressing that Scorpio nature, there's a lot of psychic energy that's freed up for us to really focus in really productive, creative, and powerful ways. So that might be sort of the theme of this whole shadow retrograde of Mercury cycle. It could also bring up places where we might be connected with other people, because Scorpio is a lot about shared resources.
Yeah.
I would just say shared resources and intimacy. So this retrograde time may be helping us to kind of see just more truth around our connections, our deep connections with other people, or situations where we might have shared resources, and if there's any kind of clarification around that that needs to be looked at, or even maybe even like separating ourselves from those situations that needs to occur. You know, this time might be bringing up the opportunity to really kind of look at those situations and begin to formulate kind of a plan of attack on how we're going to really kind of extract ourselves from these, you know, situations that we might be connected to with others that may or may not be what we want anymore. So that's a little bit about Mercury in Scorpio, shadow retrograde, going direct period. But what's happening in the process of this whole Scorpio Mercury retrograde is the fact that Mercury, and you can see here again at 16 degrees of Scorpio, today is making a trine over here to Neptune at 16 degrees of Pisces. Now, Mercury is making this trine today, and then it's also going to be making it again on the 13th of November, and making it one more time on the 28th of November. So really from now throughout the end of November, Mercury and Neptune are going to be having this relationship going on. Now, the other thing that's occurring too is that Mercury will be, or has, sextiled Saturn. And for the first time, that was on the 13th, just a couple of days ago, around the full moon time. And it will be also sextiling Saturn 2 more times on the 13th of November and the 29th of November. So again, through the month of November. And then the very last thing that Mercury is going to be doing during this retrograde time is it's going to be making a sextile relationship with Pluto. And that starts on the 19th of October, and it also happens on the 9th of November. And then just after Mercury goes direct, but it's still in its shadow phase. And that's the last time that Mercury sextiles Pluto, just before Mercury comes out of its shadow phase from this whole retrograde cycle. So a lot of details there, but my point here is this: there's something happening with Mercury during this really deep, focus-oriented time of its retrograde cycle. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Basically, today, the sextile to Neptune is happening. And you know, Neptune is this energy of not only creativity and imagination and tuning into the subtle realms of those expressions, but it's also about compassion, and it's about spiritual pursuits, because it has to do with transcending the ego structure. And when we transcend through spiritual pursuits, or even through connection to creative expression, we're no longer driven by the ego. We are connected to something larger than ourselves. So this is a theme that is being brought up during this Mercury retrograde time, as Mercury is going to be connecting with Neptune 3 times during this shadow retrograde cycle. So I feel it's going to be helping us, because both Scorpio and Pisces are water energies. So these have to do with feelings, operating from the feeling realm. And sometimes Mercury in Scorpio, it can have a very strong response, because it is about very deep feelings. And sometimes those strong responses really come from a place of wanting to protect, because Scorpio can be very private. And, these emotions are, especially because often they're emotions that have to do with what needs to be transformed. It's not comfortable having that sort of displayed in the outside world, but it brings up this desire to kind of be secretive and be private about things at times. Now, on the other hand, it can turn into this wanting to control and wanting to manipulate and wanting to get its way. So there's sort of this hidden element to the way it operates, because it doesn't want to be found out. So there's a fine kind of balance that needs to be found in the expression of the Scorpio energy. But really what I was talking about earlier is that when we do operate from a more pure expression of the Scorpio energy, I mean, not only can it be a powerful energy for fighting for a cause or for really defending, but it can also be about really getting very honest and truthful and transforming and letting go, being the phoenix rising from the ashes. So I feel that this connection between Mercury and Neptune during this cycle is going to help this Scorpio, Mercury and Scorpio, our thinking and communicating energy in this very deep, passionate way, kind of help us really sort of, in some ways, transcend the baser expressions of the Scorpio nature and bring a larger perspective into the process, and help us kind of like let go of ideas, of ways of thinking, of ingrained sort of patterns. Scorpio has a lot to do with obsession and compulsion and really deep psychological drives. So this Neptune energy can really help us to kind of see a bigger picture and perhaps assist us in the transformation of thoughts and ideas and ways of communicating that might no longer be serving us. Now, this also can be a very in general, creative energy, because Mercury is our communication and Neptune is creativity. It's also spirituality. So we can really bring a more spiritual perspective to life during this cycle. We can also tap into more creative expression during this cycle, especially with Neptune in the sign of Pisces. Neptune rules the sign of Pisces. So this will really help us, this is helping us tap into creative expression right now. And the fact that also Saturn has been sextiling Neptune on and off from the beginning of January of this year, 2019, and it'll complete in the month of November. We can really use the energy of hard work and of effort. And because it's next to Pluto, which rules Scorpio, this is all about working at transformation. But we can use this deep energy, this really strong, driven energy to apply towards being creative and being expressive through our creative gifts. So Mercury trine Neptune happening today and through the month of November. Now, at the same time, like I said, Mercury has been sextiling Saturn, and it will also sextile Pluto coming up on the 19th. Both of these energies are happening through the month of November as well. Mercury Saturn, this is really, again, being able to discipline the mind. So there's a lot of power and a lot of energy to especially during this retrograde cycle of Mercury, to really look at these deeper ingrained habitual ways of thinking, ways of communicating that might be hindering us, might be, you know, dragging us down because we've got all this psychological baggage that we're holding on to, you know, related to deep, deep psychological, you know, parts of our selves that need to potentially be, you know, just totally cleared out, let go of, and transformed. So with this Mercury sextiling not only the Saturn but the Pluto during this retrograde cycle, again, there's an opportunity here to really work at transforming old ways of thinking that are connected to psychological patterns that are just no longer serving us, and really getting us in alignment with more of our own personal authority. I mean, that's what Capricorn is all about, you know? So just any connections with others that we're still sort of dwelling on and rehashing and, you know, have not been able to really clear out or communicate about, but communicate not to, like, you know, get into a big old fight with people about, but really to be honest and truthful, and to free ourselves from, like, this any, you know, baggage that's holding us back, you know, in especially in our deep intimate relationships with other people. We have an opportunity during this Mercury retrograde cycle to in some ways kind of forgive, you know, or at least, at the very least, have some compassion, not only towards ourselves, but towards other people. And maybe just kind of let sleeping dogs lie. Is that the term? You know, just kind of be like, okay, need to move forward, can see that, you know, whatever this other person or this other situation, you know, have some kind of spiritual perspective about things, and just loosen that sort of, that, like, really tight sort of, like, I have to be right and I am right and, you know, they're wrong, you know, where we can really just allow a little bit more of an expanded perspective in the process. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you just roll over. I mean, you still have to build the structures and the foundations that you want in your life, you know, and it may mean really just walking away from and letting go of old ways of thinking about things, old ways of communicating, old ways of holding on to vendettas, you know. It's like, it's like we can really move into a place where we have an opportunity at this, during this whole cycle, all the way through November, to just kind of drop things, drop and move on, because that's what Scorpio is all about. It wants to transform. So we've got Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. We're transforming our thinking. We're transforming our communicating. We also are seeing, you know, maybe where we need to communicate more powerfully, and we need to communicate with more conviction, and communicate in a way that's deeply connected to our desires and our passions, you know, what really we're driven by, you know. But opportunity here to really create new foundation, new structure, with new ways of thinking, if we can really step into letting go of old, outworn patterns of thinking, vendettas, negative, like obsessive, compulsive, you know, ways of thinking that really just suck our energy, sap our energy. You know, again, going back to what Scorpio is really about, it's a very powerful energy. But if it's all caught up in the unconscious, and it's all, you know, entwined in knots around old psychological things, issues that we're not really addressing, it's going to drain us, and we get our energy is no longer ours, you know, because it's now attached to all these other places, people, and things, and it's not there for us to really harness and focus and drive towards, you know, things that support our lives. The last thing I want to say is that Mercury, when it does retrograde, is going to retrograde back to 11 degrees, which is basically trining the North Node in Cancer. And the North Node in Cancer is about really connecting with what we feel. Cancer is another water energy. So you can see there's this kind of water trine. You can see these blue lines here between the North Node, Mercury, and Neptune. So when Mercury retrogrades, it's going to go all the way back to 11, and it's going of Scorpio, and it's going to trine the North Node in Cancer. So again, the North Node in Cancer is about needing to move towards connecting with our very deep feelings and creating emotional security within ourselves. That's what Cancer is all about. You know, Cancer rules nurturing, and it rules mothering, and it rules our feelings, you know. So we are being asked at this time to move towards the North Node in Cancer, which is about caring for ourselves, taking care of ourselves. So because Mercury retrograde in Scorpio will be coming all the way back to that 11 degrees of Scorpio, is going to give us an opportunity to see perhaps where we might be in some ways mentally sabotaging ourselves in ways that are not really very caring for ourselves. They're not really supporting ourselves. And we can maybe get a clearer picture of that, so that when Mercury does go direct, we can start to make those shifts and changes, whether it's through the need to communicate more honestly and truthfully, or whether it's just through being able to kind of clear out some mental patterns that allow us to really embody more of that North Node in Cancer energy that we're being asked to step into at this time, of loving ourselves more, caring for ourselves more, paying attention to more to how we feel, and really taking action in ways that make us feel nurtured and supported and loved and cared for. So I think I'll end this video there. Please subscribe if you like my videos. I'd really appreciate that. I do offer readings. You can reach me at info@highaltitudeastrology.com, or go to my website, highaltitudeastrology.com. Thank you so much. Take care.